I know many of you enjoy using these videos to help you fall asleep. So before you start to drift off, it would be great if you could leave a comment sharing where you're listening from around the world. If you're enjoying the episodes, don't forget to like and subscribe as well. Now, let's get cozy, settle in, and begin. My neighbor was killed by police, but nobody remembers it back in November. I was woken up by the sound of sirens and shouting. When I looked outside, police officers filled the street. Some had their guns aimed at the yellow house across from mine. Others were knocking on doors, telling people to evacuate. It's hard to explain just how surreal it was to hear the gunshots that killed Gary Wallace. Families walked down the street together, kids still wrapped in blankets. Gary, kind man who used to overpay me to shovel his driveway. Gary, the one who handed out full-sized candy bars every Halloween. Gary, the neighbor who once ran into a burning house to rescue a dog. The news spread quickly. Headlines read, "Woman escapes elderly serial killer in quiet Kansas town." And bodies in the basement, the house of horrors belonging to Gary Wallace, according to police. Gary's motive may have been ideological. I read every article I could find, trying to make sense of how someone I'd known and admired for years could do such horrific things. He grew up in that house and moved back in after inheriting it from his parents. Authorities eventually uncovered 27 bodies dating back 50 years, meaning he started killing when he was just 13. The oldest remains, all preteens, were found buried in his rose garden. The garden I had helped him maintain more than once. 5 more victims were hidden beneath the trapdoor under his floorboards. I had walked over that spot countless times. The rest were discovered in the basement, sealed in boxes filled with lye. My mother had even helped him stack those very boxes. Years ago, when he asked us to help organize his things after his wife, Loretta, died of ALS, his house remained blocked off for months. The handprints left by the woman who escaped were still visible a week later. The blood from the night he was shot stayed on the porch just as long, but today, I saw Gary walking to his mailbox like he always used to. I thought I must be dreaming. I pinched myself repeatedly, but nothing changed. I watched him tend his lawn all morning. He even stopped by a neighbor's home to borrow a gardening tool, and they acted like nothing was out of the ordinary. I started replaying everything. In my mind, I know this happened. I saw them put up the crime scene tape. I watched as they unearthed the first skull from the rose garden. I had broken down in therapy, trying to process my grief for a man I'd admired and my horror at what he had done. I remember it all. I looked up the names of the 3 victims who had been identified at the time. All were real missing persons from my area, and they matched the images I remembered from the articles I had once printed out. Now those articles are gone, not just from my home, but seemingly erased from the internet. I had never seen or heard of those victims before Gary's crimes came to light. I've been monitoring Gary all day. He recently retired, so he spends nearly all his time outside. If I really am imagining this, if it was some kind of dream, how do I explain what I'm about to do? How can I justify digging a huge hole in his rose garden or breaking into his house to check the basement? I know he's a light sleeper, always nosy, always watching. He never stays still for long. Since learning about Instacart and Uber, he rarely leaves home anymore. Is it even possible to report something like this? Can I just tell the police I saw something suspicious in his basement? The officers here know Gary, and they know me, too. I doubt they'd take me seriously. And if I tried to file a report, I'd have no way to stay anonymous. So, does anyone have any suggestions? I found a book that predicts deaths, and they're all coming true. It was a rainy Saturday morning. The sound of rain tapping on my window filled the room. I looked up from my laptop and sighed quietly. The rain was both distracting and oddly calming. I thought maybe it could help me focus on the history essay I needed to finish for school. As I typed, a sudden burst of shouting interrupted me. I froze, fingers hovering over the keyboard, and muttered to myself, "Not again." I left my room, heading downstairs. The voices grew louder as I reached the living room and turned the corner. There stood my mom and older brother, Mark, arguing. "Mom," I said, "I'm sorry. I should have called, but I didn't expect the party to go that late," Mark said. "And I've told you I don't like you or your brother staying out that late. Anything could have happened. You could have been hurt or worse." They kept going, clearly unaware I was even there. I considered walking away and letting them deal with it. Even though I'm 25 and Mark's 27, Mom still treats us like teenagers. She insists we both live with her until we're 30, and that's been a point of tension. Frustrated, I cleared my throat loudly. They turned toward me. "Oh, Daniel, I'm sorry. Are we disturbing your studying?" Mom asked. "I've been trying to study for over an hour. I can't concentrate with you two yelling like this," I snapped. Mark blushed with embarrassment but still seemed too frustrated to back down. "Just trying to explain to him that being out that late isn't safe," Mom said gently. She's always been overly cautious, worrying about everything, even things that don't matter. "You know what? I'll just go to the library. Maybe I can actually get something done there and in peace," I said, my voice rising as I walked upstairs. I shoved my laptop and notebook into my bag, grumbling to myself about the arguing and how Mom still treats us like kids. Then came a knock at my door. I turned around and saw Mark standing there. I hadn't even heard him come up. "Let me guess, Mom sent you to stop me from leaving?" I asked. "Yeah. She says it's a bad idea to go out in the rain. You might get sick or struck by lightning." I told her that's ridiculous, but you know how she is, rolling my eyes. I sat down to put on my shoes, making sure the straps were comfortable. "I don't care what she thinks. I'm going to the library to finish my essay, and I'd appreciate it if you tell her I'll be back before dinner." Without waiting for a reply, I threw my bag over my shoulder and walked downstairs. Mom was standing there, clearly ready to say something. I raised my hand to cut her off. "I'll be back before dinner," I said firmly, then stepped outside. The rain and thunder were the only sounds. I pulled up my hoodie, checked that my bag was zipped, and began walking to the city library. Didn't think the library would be open on a weekend. Muttered. Soon I reached the front doors. A small smile crept across my face. Libraries have always made me feel calm. The smell of old books, the soft quiet, the comfort of it all. Inside, I greeted the woman at the front desk. She gave me a polite smile, although I could tell she wasn't thrilled by how soaked I looked. I found a seat, unpacked my things, and started reviewing my notes. My laptop stayed in my bag while I tried to make sense of what I'd written, but it still wasn't clicking. Went to the front desk and asked if there were any history encyclopedias available. That might help. She pointed me toward the back corner and warned me that some of the books were quite old. I thanked her and made my way over. Most of the books seemed dull and not helpful. Then I turned down an unfamiliar aisle. The light overhead flickered and the shelves were coated in dust. A few insects scurried out of the shadows. Despite the eerie feel, I smiled. Maybe one of these will be useful, I thought. I started pulling books off the shelf, flipping through their covers. Many I'd seen before. Others looked like they were printed decades ago. While moving one book aside, something heavy fell onto my foot. I winced and held back a yelp. Looking down, I saw a thick brown book on the floor. I bent to pick it up. There were no library labels or barcodes. The cover was worn. The spine cracked. I brushed off some dust and read the title, Prophetic. Pages curious. I opened it. The pages were yellowed, filled with handwritten entries and strange symbols. Each page described someone's life and death in surprising detail. I recognized the names, friends, family, people I knew. Then I turned a page and froze. Timothy Green, age 23, dies in a car accident on April 15th, 2003. Tim was my childhood best friend. April 15th was tomorrow. My heart started racing. I slammed the book shut and looked around, half expecting someone to jump out and say it was a prank, but the library was silent. Only the rain against the window and my breathing filled the space. I needed to warn Tim. I tucked the book under my arm and hurried back to my table, grabbed my things, ran out into the rain. Despite being out of shape, I sprinted home, wondering if this was real. Was the book cursed? Was the library hiding it on purpose at home? I raced past Mom and Mark in the kitchen. They weren't arguing, a rare surprise, but I didn't have time to explain. In my room, I tossed the book in my bag on the desk and grabbed my phone. I called Tim. My hands were shaking. When he picked up, I asked urgently, "Hey, are you going out tonight?" He told me he was going to see a new horror film and invited me to come if I was done being Mr. History. I begged him not to go, to stay home and be safe. He laughed, joking that I sounded like my mom. I almost told him about the book but held back. He wouldn't have believed me anyway. Just then, Mom called my name. I told Tim I had to go and ended the call. I glanced at the book again. Nervous it was already too late, Mom called again. I left my room to find her waiting at the bottom of the stairs. Dinner was ready and she reminded me my food was getting cold. At the table, I picked at my peas while Mom and Mark talked, but I couldn't focus. All I could think about was the book, and Tim. Mark noticed. "Hey, what's up with you?" he asked. I nearly jumped but kept my cool, just thinking about my history essay. Found some useful stuff at the library I couldn't tell them about. The book, they wouldn't believe me, and Tim didn't either. After dinner, I went back to my room, sat on the bed, and opened the book again to Tim's page. I stared at it, wondering if tearing it out could somehow change what was coming. But then I remembered this book didn't seem to belong to the library. No codes, no stickers. I sighed and placed it on my nightstand. I got ready for bed and laid there in the dark, thinking about Tim and what might happen tomorrow. Morning came. Sunlight spilled through the window. I sat up quickly and grabbed my phone, hoping for a message from Tim. Nothing. I waited all day. Still no reply. Panic set in. I finally called his house, but it wasn't Tim who answered. It was his mom. And when I asked where he was, she gasped in horror. She told me that Tim had been in a car crash while heading to the grocery store. The paramedic said he didn't survive. At that moment, my legs gave out. I leaned against the wall, sliding down until I was sitting on the floor. The prophetic pages had been right. It predicted Tim's death. No matter what I tried, I hadn't been able to stop it. The very next day, still overwhelmed and confused, I returned to the library. I was searching for answers, struggling to make sense of what had just happened. I sat at the same desk as before, pulled the book from my bag, and stared at it for a long moment before opening the pages again. Every entry documented the lives and deaths of different people. Some were names I recognized, others I didn't, but all of them described people I had known at some point, along with exactly how and when they would die. As I flipped through the pages, one in particular made me freeze. Jessica Carter, age 25, dies from an aneurysm on April 16, 2003. Jessica, my girlfriend. A wave of fear ran through me. I remembered our last moment together, laughing at something silly over coffee. I didn't waste a second. I shoved the book into my bag, grabbed my phone, and called her immediately. "Hey, Daniel, what's going on?" "I'm at work," she answered. "Listen to me. You need to stop what you're doing. Please, go home. Something's not right. You're in danger." I explained everything about the book I found in the library, how it listed the deaths of people I knew. I told her it had predicted Tim's accident down to the exact date, and now it had her name listed too. She paused, then replied, "Daniel, I think you've been watching too many horror movies, but sure, if you're coming to the restaurant later, bring this magical book with you." Then she hung up. I wanted to scream. I started running, wishing I brought my car or anything faster than just my feet. By the time I reached the restaurant, I was gasping for air. Outside, a crowd had formed near the entrance. At first, I thought it might be a sale or maybe an argument, but I didn't care about the reason. I just needed to find Jessica. I forced my way through the group and stepped inside. Paramedics were already there, and part of the area had been blocked off. I couldn't see clearly, so I tapped a nearby man on the shoulder. "Sir, what happened?" One of the staff collapsed. "Paramedics say she didn't make it," he said, voice low. When he said she, my heart sank. I pushed past everyone and saw her, Jessica, lying still on the floor, eyes closed. "No, Jessica," I yelled. A paramedic came over. "Do you know her?" "I'm her boyfriend," I said quickly. "I talked to her not long ago. I told her to leave. I told her something bad might happen." I tried. She gently placed her hands on my shoulders. "I'm so sorry. Your girlfriend died from a brain aneurysm. There was nothing we could have done." I thought about showing her the book. Maybe she believed me, but I knew it would only raise questions I couldn't answer. So I nodded, thanked her quietly, and walked away, leaving the building in silence. I was furious. The book had taken someone else I loved. Over the next few weeks, the pattern didn't stop. Each page revealed another name I recognized, someone else marked for death. The book had become a trap, and I couldn't stop reading it. Its pages seemed to understand my pain. The ink on each entry looked darker, heavier. Then I came to a name that notes, age 27. Died of a heart attack on April 30th, 2023. That was tonight. I jumped up from bed and rushed to my brother's room. He was tying his shoes. Where are you going? It's almost 9 p.m. Couldn't sleep. Going for a run just to clear my head. I begged him not to go out. Told him it wasn't safe tonight. He laughed, saying I was starting to sound like Mom. An hour later, I was in the kitchen helping Mom bake her famous double chocolate chip cookies. But I could tell something was bothering her. I asked what was wrong. She told me Mark still hadn't come back from his walk. He hadn't even texted. I felt that familiar weight in my chest. I told her I needed to step out quickly and she gave a silent nod. I threw on my shoes and coat and sprinted to the park, Mark's favorite spot. As I neared the trail, I saw a figure curled up near a bench. My heart pounded as I ran closer. It was Mark, lying on the ground holding his chest. Mark, I shouted. I dropped beside him, but I already knew. The book had taken him to first Tim, then Jessica, and now Mark. I couldn't handle the loss anymore. It felt like I was losing everything and everyone I cared about. Then a thought struck me. I grabbed the prophetic pages and returned to the library for answers. The librarian, an older woman with sharp green eyes, looked up as I approached. What is this book? Why is it doing this? I asked, slamming it on the desk. She didn't answer at first, but when she took the book in her hands, her expression changed. Where did you find it? She asked quietly. It fell off a shelf the last time I was here, I said. I was just looking for history books. Now I want to know what this is. The book, she said, is called The Prophetic Pages. It's been around for as long as anyone can remember. It reveals the fate of those you're connected to, not just death, but the effects of your actions and the bonds you've formed. But this isn't fate. It's a curse, I shouted. Maybe it's a mirror, she said. It doesn't cause the events, it just shows you what's already set in motion. Through your relationships, your decisions, your past. I stepped back, stunned. Was I somehow responsible for all this? Had my presence or my interference sealed the fate of those I loved? Is there any way to change it, to stop it? I asked. There is one, she said. You must break the ties, but doing so comes at a cost. Her words hit me hard. I didn't reply. I turned and left, leaving the book behind on her desk. I knew then, to protect the people I cared about, I had to walk away from them, every single one. In the weeks that followed, I isolated myself. If I saw someone I knew, I turned the other way. I ignored calls, deleted messages, and avoided all contact. It was painful, but the death stopped. Everyone I loved was still alive. One afternoon, I walked into my room planning to play some games. And there it was. The Prophetic Pages, sitting on my bed. My hands trembled as I picked it up. I opened it to the last page. It was blank. Then words slowly started forming on the page, as if the book was writing them in real time. Daniel Roberts, to 25 years old, died from loneliness on May 15th, 2023. The book slipped from my hands. That date was tomorrow. My heart dropped. I felt sick. All this time, I'd been trying to protect others. I thought I was doing the right thing, but in the end, I had doomed myself. I cut ties with everyone, even my own mother, and now I was facing consequence alone. The next day, I sat quietly on the floor of my room. The air felt heavy, pressing down on me. I remembered the joy, the laughter I'd once shared with Mark, Jessica, and Tim. Now there was silence. Mom knocked on my door a few times, trying to talk to me, but I didn't answer. As night fell, I began hearing faint whispers. The pages of the book shuffled on their own like they were alive. I stood, walked to the nightstand, and picked it up again. Every page was blank now. The book was done. I dropped it. It hit the floor with a dull thud, and I understood, finally. The real horror wasn't the deaths the book had predicted. It was the isolation I had chosen. I had erased my own life, trying to save everyone else. In the end, I became part of the book myself, a forgotten name. If final entry. And now, the Prophetic Pages wait for their next reader. My dad was terrified of my boyfriend. Now I know why my dad was visibly shaken the first time he met my boyfriend. I had been pretty nervous about introducing Ellen to my parents. He was the first person I'd seriously dated in a while. We met at the store where I worked. He came in to buy running shoes and left with my phone number. We'd been seeing each other for just over 2 months when he started asking to meet my family. When the day came, my mom greeted him at the door like she always did with a warm hug and her usual friendliness. He thanked her and stepped inside. Looking a little nervous, Alan was tall, a few years older than me, and had quite a few tattoos. I gave him a quick kiss on the cheek and brought him into the dining room, where my dad was already sitting, sipping a beer and focused on his phone. But when he looked up and saw Alan, his reaction was immediate. His eyes widened and his mouth dropped slightly. Alan stepped forward, extending his hand politely. My dad stared at it for a few seconds before slowly lifting his own, almost hesitantly. I didn't expect that. Yes, I knew my dad could be protective. He's a retired police officer, but the discomfort on his face felt different. I found it disrespectful, to be honest. My mom clearly noticed the tension and stepped in. She asked Alan to take a seat across from my dad at our small 4-person table and encouraged us to go ahead and start serving ourselves. Over dinner, my mom made an effort to keep the conversation going. She asked Alan about his background. He said his family were immigrants and that he'd grown up in San Antonio before moving here. That caught her attention. She smiled and said she loved San Antonio. We had lived there briefly before my dad was transferred. From that point, things lightened up. Alan relaxed and started talking more. He shared stories about his childhood in San Antonio and spoke a bit about his job at a car dealership. Conversation flowed between the three of us, and it felt fairly normal, except for my dad. He stayed silent, pushing his food around his plate like he had no appetite. Even when my mom tried to include him in the conversation, he just stared at his plate or glanced up with a pale, dazed expression like something was deeply wrong. When we finished eating, my mom mentioned she'd made a special dessert for Alan, her well-known cheesecake, the same one I'd spent hours helping her shop for earlier. She excused herself to grab it, and I told Alan I'd help her out. I thought leaving him and my dad alone for a few minutes might help ease the awkwardness between them. In the kitchen, my mom immediately checked the fridge for the cake. I took the opportunity to ask her if she had any idea what was going on. My dad, she wasn't entirely sure, but said it might have something to do with a piece of bad news he'd received earlier. Something involving 2 of his former police department colleagues' names I vaguely remembered. What happened to them? I asked. They both died last month. Tragic stuff, she said, while adjusting the cheesecake topping. One was in a car accident with his entire family. The other died in a house fire. It was sad, no doubt. I figured maybe my dad was just dealing with grief. Still, I didn't think that explained how he was treating Alan. My mom said she was almost done, but needed her offset spatula. She asked me to check with my dad to see where he left it. On my way back to the dining room, I grabbed plates and forks, hoping things between them had warmed up while I was gone. But as soon as I walked in, I froze. My dad was crying hard, not just tearing up, but sobbing in a way I'd never seen before. Alan hadn't moved. He sat silently, staring at my dad with an intense, unreadable expression. I walked over slowly, still confused. I set down the plates and quietly asked what was going on. Neither of them responded to me. My dad took a shaky breath and turned toward Alan. I didn't know, he said, voice cracking. Was just doing my job. I didn't know who you were when I made that arrest, when you framed me. Alan interrupted, his tone cold and distant. I spent 15 years in prison because of you. I was following orders, my dad said, almost pleading. Alan gave a slight smile. Funny, he said, because everyone I talked to, they all said you were the one giving the orders. It wasn't hard to get the truth, not after I dealt with them. My dad suddenly leaned forward, glanced at me briefly, and said urgently, just leave my family out of this. They had nothing to do with it. My mother took her own life, Alan said, his voice low and steady. She couldn't live with what people thought I'd done. He paused for a moment, then continued, so I've had a lot of time to think about what should come next. For the first time since I'd come back into the room, he looked directly at me. There was something wild in his eyes, focused, unsettling. I didn't know what to do. I was frozen. Then my dad suddenly gripped my arm. The spatula's in the second drawer of the pantry, he said. Dad, this really isn't the second drawer, he repeated, his voice low but firm. Go get it for your mother. His grip tightened. Something in his tone made it clear he was trying to tell me something without saying it directly. And then I remembered he kept the spare Glock in that drawer. Paranoid habit from his years in law enforcement. I nodded silently and walked down the hall. Ellen's stare followed me until I turned the corner dot. As soon as I was out of view, I ran. I passed my mom, who looked puzzled, and opened the pantry drawer. The gun was there, just as I remembered. I loaded it quickly and ran back toward the dining room. But by the time I got there, Alan was gone. No sign of him anywhere. Only my dad remained sitting motionless at the table, head bowed. I thought maybe he'd passed out. But when I got closer, I saw the truth. He wasn't breathing. A dessert fork had been plunged deep into his neck, driven in halfway. A gaslight flame burns. Forever in a cave, as strange as it might sound. This could be my last real chance to share what happened. No, someone might reply saying the site never existed to begin with right before I refresh and get an error or a link to buy the domain. Reddit disappearing is honestly the least. My concerns now that this all started because of Graydon. I hadn't seen or heard from him in 3 months. Then last night, completely out of nowhere, he showed up at my apartment. He looked rough. His normally tidy brown hair was oily and messy, hanging in tangled strands. Dark circles framed his eyes, and his clothes looked like they hadn't been changed in days. But what stood out most was how he kept glancing behind him, like he expected someone to be following. "Do you remember me?" he asked. "Even waiting for an invite inside." "Of course I do, Graydon. Where have you been? I've texted you for months." "Your mom said, please." He grabbed my arm, his hand was shaking. "I can't explain here. Just trust me. I have to show you something." We'd been friends since high school, and I'd never seen him like this. Graydon was the kind of person who color-coded schedules and planned everything weeks ahead. Seeing him this scattered and panicked was unsettling. "All right," I said, grabbing my jacket quietly. Emma was asleep, and I didn't want to wake her. I slipped off my engagement ring and left it on the nightstand just in case. "Where are we going?" "Whitmore Caverns, about an hour north." I knew the place. An old limestone cave system that used to have tours until a few accidents shut it down in the 90s. People mostly avoided it now, but the entrance was still there if you knew where to look. The drive was quiet. Graydon hardly spoke. He stared out the window and occasionally muttered things I couldn't catch. When I asked what this was about, he just replied, "Not yet. You'll see when we get there." We parked near the ruins of the old visitor center, a graffiti-covered concrete building. Graydon pulled two flashlights from his backpack and handed me one. "Follow me," he said. "And don't talk. Not until we're far enough in." "Far enough for what?" "Just trust me. No talking. It matters." The cave entrance was hidden behind thick bushes about 50 yards from the lot. Graydon moved like he'd done this before, leading me down a narrow stone trail that vanished into darkness. The cave was larger than I had expected. We could walk side by side through the main corridor, the limestone walls sparkling in our lights. Somewhere ahead, water dripped steadily, echoing into the dark. We didn't speak. For nearly 20 minutes, we kept descending. The air grew colder with each step. I could see my breath in the beam of my flashlight. Graydon never hesitated. He always seemed to know where to go, even with multiple branching paths. Finally, he stopped at a section of wall that looked like every other one. But as I moved closer, I noticed a small round hole about the size of a baseball, cut into the rock at eye level. "All right," he whispered. "Do you see the flame?" I pointed my flashlight into the hole. It looked empty, just a 6-inch recess ending in stone. "There's nothing there, Graydon. Don't say that." He grabbed my wrist. "Just answer me, yes or no. Do you see a flame?" His grip was too tight, and his eyes looked wild. This wasn't the Graydon I knew. He looked like someone barely holding it together. "No," I said carefully. "I don't see anything." He clenched his jaw in frustration. "Look again. Really look." "Are you sure there's nothing burning?" I checked again, but the answer was the same, just stone and shadow. "I'm sure. It's empty." Then suddenly, he shoved my hand into the hole. The pain hit instantly. It felt like my hand had landed on burning metal. I screamed and yanked it out, falling back against the cave wall. I looked down. A perfect circle-shaped burn was already forming in the center of my palm. The skin was red, blistering, and felt like it was still on fire. "What the hell, Graydon? Why would you?" I turned to the hole again and froze. "Now." A small flame flickered inside. It stood maybe 2 inches tall, glowing softly. I could feel its warmth, see its light bouncing off the walls. You see it now? Graydon asked, his voice full of desperate relief. Yes, I do. That's when he lost control. Yes, he shouted, his voice bouncing through the tunnels. I'm not crazy, someone else sees it. I'm not alone anymore. He began laughing and crying at the same time, spinning around like a child. 3 weeks I've been living with this, and now you see it too. He was so caught in his reaction that he didn't notice the jagged rocks behind him. He stumbled backward, fell, and hit his head on a pointed piece of limestone. The sound echoed like a gunshot. His body twitched once and went still. Blood pooled beneath him, dark in the soft glow of the flame that now burned steadily in the wall. It took me nearly 2 hours to drag his body out. He was heavier than I thought, and the twisting paths made it hard to stay on track. Sweat and tears blurred my vision, and my injured hand throbbed with every step. By the time I reached the parking lot, I was soaked in blood. Died as soon as I had signal. I called 911. Paramedics got there first, followed by 2 sheriff's deputies. They immediately started asking questions. I told them everything, how Graydon had come to my place, what happened in the cave, the fall. They loaded his body into the ambulance, covered in a white sheet, later at the police station. The questions kept coming. Why were we in the cave? What were we doing down there? How did the accident happen? I answered everything, but when I mentioned the flame, I noticed the officers exchanging uncertain looks. For 3 hours, the police chief entered the interview room with a folder in hand. Look, he said, taking a seat across from me. Don't know what kind of game this is, but we need to clear something up. I'm not playing a game. I replied. I told you what happened. He opened the folder and laid out several photos. They were of the cave, specifically the spot where Graydon had fallen. But in every photo, there was no body, no blood, no trace of anything. We found you 3 hours ago. He said, you were alone, covered in blood, talking about your dead friend. But we searched those caves, top to bottom. There was no body, no sign anyone else was ever there. That's not possible, I said. You put him in the ambulance. Watched it happen. There was no ambulance, no body, and no record of a Graydon ever living in this county. I stared at the photos. The rock where Graydon had struck his head was clean. No stains, no damage, nothing. He was my friend, I whispered. We went to high school together. The chief leaned back. Technically, it's not illegal to file a false death report. But what are you trying to get out of this? Money? Attention? Is this some kind of episode? No, we're letting you go with a warning, he said. But if you come back here with more stories about imaginary friends dying in caves, it's going to be a different conversation. They released me an hour later. I took a cab home. Still in a fog, everything felt off, wrong, like I didn't belong in my own life anymore. I kept looking at the burn on my palm, my only proof any of it had happened. When I got home, Emma was awake, curled up on the couch. Vince, you're okay. What happened? You look awful. I sat beside her and explained everything. Graydon, the cave, the accident, the police not believing me. She listened quietly, occasionally touching my arm or brushing my hair back. That sounds terrifying, she said, but you're safe now. You're home. She kissed my forehead and got up. I've got an early morning. Tried to get some rest. Next thing I knew, I was waking up on the couch. The sun was up. Birds chirped outside. I never fall asleep that easily, but after everything, I wasn't surprised. Emma had already left, but there was a note on the counter. I love you, sleepyhead. I smiled, despite the unease, and slipped it into my pocket. I wanted to hold on to some kind of normalcy. On my way out, I called Graydon's number twice. Each time, I got a dead signal. I stopped at the corner store for coffee, my usual routine. For 2 years, I'd been getting the same large coffee there, always 99 cents. Always from the same spot. There was usually a sign, coffee, always 99 cents, but today it read, Arabic coffee, $2.50 a cup. I handed over $1. This should cover it. Cashier looked at me like I was joking. You know that's not enough. It's $2.50. I chuckled. Come on, Mike. It's always been 99 cents. He looked at me, frowning. Yeah, Vince. You come here almost daily, but the price has always been $2.50. You okay? I turned to the coffee stand. the sign definitely read to $2.50. Then Mike nodded toward my hand. Hey, looks like you finally left her. Good for you, man. You're a free man now. Confused, I looked down at my hand. I had forgotten to put my ring back on. I laughed awkwardly. Oh, I just took it off last night. Just one of those things. It felt too complicated to explain. I was already running late for work. Sure, man, the clerk said, giving me an exaggerated wink as he handed me the receipt. I headed back to my car. At work, I tried to focus, but that strange moment at the corner store kept playing in my head. Around 10 a.m., my coworker Dave stopped by my desk. Morning, Vince. You look like you didn't sleep, he said, glancing at my face. The moment he spoke, a wave of exhaustion hit me. It wasn't just tiredness, it was like my body wanted to shut down completely. My eyelids felt heavy. I had to grab the edge of my desk just to stay upright. At least that tea should help, Dave said, nodding at the cup in my hand. It's coffee, I replied, bringing it to my lips. But it wasn't coffee. The flavor was unmistakable, strong Earl Grey, hot with a hint of bergamot. I spit it out without thinking. I stared at the cup, confused. I had brewed coffee myself, poured it, tasted it, but this was definitely tea. Dave had already moved on, leaving me alone with the drink and a growing sense of unease. The exhaustion deepened. My head felt too heavy to hold up. I rested it on my desk for just a second. Already crashing, another co-worker, Joan, said as she passed with a stack of files. Come on, it's only 10. You've got this. As soon as she said it, the exhaustion vanished. I sat upright, alert and focused, like someone had flipped a switch in my brain. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I tried to concentrate, but something felt off. The tea, the strange energy shift, it all seemed tied to the cave, somehow. At lunch, I texted Emma. Something funny happened at the corner store. I'll tell you later. Made me laugh. No reply. After work, heading home. Need me to grab anything still? Nothing. As I packed up, my boss, Mr. Harrison, showed up at my desk. He looked irritated. Nothing new, but this time his expression was colder than usual. Vince, we need to talk about your recent work, he said loudly. Loud enough for nearby co-workers to hear. Your reports have been careless, your focus is off, and frankly, your attitude's been poor. I know I've been distracted lately, sir, but I'm not interested in excuses, he interrupted. You're supposed to be a professional. Right now, you're acting like someone who doesn't belong here. Useless. The word hit me harder than expected. I felt something cold settle. In my chest, a hollowness I couldn't explain. At that moment, my phone buzzed. Then again, and again. 3 alerts from my banking app. I checked my phone. My checking account was overdrawn negative $847. My savings, which had over $3,000 yesterday, now read $0. Even my emergency fund was wiped out. I tried to say something, but Mr. Harrison was already gone. I sat there stunned, staring at my phone. No withdrawals, no transfers, no transaction history. Just empty accounts, like the money had never been there at all. When I got home, I knew something was wrong before I even opened the door. The apartment felt hollow inside. Most of the furniture was missing. The dining set Emma and I picked out, our shared bookshelf, the framed vacation photos gone. All that remained was a couch facing the TV, a gaming console, and a pile of old pizza boxes and empty cans. Emma, I called out. Nothing. The clerk's words echoed. You finally left her. I called her, my hands shaking. She answered on the third ring. Her voice was unfamiliar, cold. Hello, Emma, thank God. Where are you? What happened to our place? Everything's gone. What are you doing? She asked sharply. It's me, Vince. A pause. I heard children in the background. A man's voice, distant, muffled. Look, Vince, she said. Finally, I know it's you, but this isn't funny. If this is some kind of joke, Emma, please. We're engaged. We live together. We had dinner 2 nights ago. You made that pasta you love, sun-dried tomatoes, remember? Her voice rose. You broke up with me 3 years ago, Vince. I don't know how you got my new number, but this is not okay. I knew it was you texting earlier. Emma, please. I have the note you left me this morning. It says, I love you, sleepyhead. I still have it. I'm hanging up now. Don't call again or I'll report you, but goodbye, creep. She snapped and hung up. I dropped the phone and sank to the floor. This couldn't be real. Emma and I had been together for 2 years, engaged for 6 months. I had proof photos, messages, emails, but the apartment told a different story. No second toothbrush, no shared closet. Nothing of hers remained. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the note. The handwriting was hers. The front still read, "I love you, sleepyhead." But then the ink began to fade. Letter by letter, it disappeared, leaving the paper blank. I turned it over. There was more writing on the back I hadn't noticed. "You're the only one for me." As I read those words, I heard a chain of crashes from outside, cars colliding, the screech of tires. The hiss of engines died, but no voices, no cries for help, just mechanical noise. I ran outside to the street. Every car I could see had crashed into one another, into light poles, into curbs, but all of them were empty, engines still running, headlights shining through the dim light. The sidewalks were deserted, no people, no movement. I kept going, calling out. Nothing. Storefronts were dark, windows empty. The city had gone silent. Then I heard one horn different from the rest, not steady, but repeating like someone was hitting it over and over. I followed it until I found an overturned car near the highway. Someone was inside. It was Emma. She was in the passenger seat, strapped in. A shard of glass pierced her neck. Blood poured from the wound pooling beneath her. Her foot jammed into the steering wheel, hit the horn with every movement. She was still conscious. Barely. When she saw me, her mouth moved like she wanted to speak, but only a wet gurgle came out. Her green eyes locked onto mine eyes. I knew better than my own reflection. She remembered. I could see it. Even through the pain, she knew me. I tried to reach for her through the shattered window, but I couldn't help. The injury was fatal. All I could do was hold her gaze as the light in her eyes slowly faded. Her foot slipped from the wheel. The horn stopped, and everything went quiet. I'm back in what's left of our apartment, writing this, sitting in a room stripped of the life we built. The city is empty. Everyone's gone. Not just Emma, everyone. And I think I know why. You're the only one for me. I'm sharing this in the hope that anyone is still out there. Maybe someone else saw the flame. Maybe someone understands. If you're reading this, please say something. Let me know I'm not alone. Because if I really am the last one left, I don't know how much longer I can take it. The flame is still there. I can feel it pulling me back, promising clarity, promising an end. Maybe it's time to return. Maybe it's time to pass this on, to let someone else carry this. Wait, if you're reading this, please, tell me you're real. Tell me I'm not the only one left.